Hi friends, I'm so glad you're here for our See the Light, Yes You Can Draw special story art class. Today we're going to be focusing on the story of Moses, and we're going to call it Hope for the Nations. Now Moses, of course, had a very long life, was an amazing man of God, and there's lots of stories in the stories of Moses, but today we're going to focus on the very beginning of the story of Moses. Hope is something that we look forward to. It's a dream, it's a goal. It's something actually that we get from God. Not things of this earth, but we know our hope is in heaven to be with God and Jesus. Well, back at that time, the Israelites were the ones who really needed hope. They were the chosen people of God, but they had been enslaved for generation after generation by the Egyptians. And it was a scary time. But Moses comes in because God had a plan to give hope to the nation of Israel. Now, before we get started on our drawing of Moses, let's see what you need for today's special story. You'll need a piece of medium-toned colored paper, 9 by 12, no bigger than 11 by 14. A standard pencil, a kneaded eraser, or just a really good eraser. You'll need a set of pastels, at least 12. I like to use a bigger set so that I have more color choices. You'll need a small set of fluorescent pastels, and you can get these from our See the Light website. Some items to stay clean when we're working with pastels, like baby wipes and some tissues. You can always use a moist paper towel. And a small black light. This is also available at the See the Light website. Not everyone has a black light, so talk to Mom and Dad and see if you can go and get a small black light from the See the Light website, because that will really make this drawing exciting. Now, if you don't have a black light, that's okay, because this drawing will be a great addition to your portfolio anyway. Now, to get started with our story, we're going to just start with a pencil. And to just put in some basic lines for our middle ground, foreground, middle ground, background. So go up about a third of the way on your paper that's lengthwise. Now I'm going to make my line a little darker, friends, so that you can see it on camera, but you're going to keep yours fairly light. I'm going to go across kind of a straight line. It doesn't have to be ruler straight, like so. Okay? This is actually the Nile River here at the very front. And we're going to place in the Nile River a basket. So we're going to make an oval shape, like so. And come down from the sides, and then make another line that's parallel to the bottom line of the oval, just like so. If you remember from the story, Moses was placed in a basket and put on the Nile River. Now, why would his mother do that? Well, see, the Pharaoh was so worried because the Israelites kept having larger families and the nation of Israel kept growing, and he was worried they were going to overtake his Egyptian army. And as a man of pride that he was, he devised an evil plot, and he decreed that all of the Hebrew babies born, the male babies, were to be killed. Well, Moses' mother, of course, knew that God had a greater plan for Moses than that awful thing that the Pharaoh decided. So she decided to save him, and when he was only about 3 months old, she put him in a basket to float down the Nile River. Now, you can't just put a basket with a baby in it in the river, because the water will come into the holes. This is a traditional basket, and you can see that the weave is fairly open. There's light that comes through. She selected a basket that had a very tight weave. You can see how tight this is. So the reeds are wound very tightly, almost creating a solid surface. But she also coated the basket with a black sticky substance called tar, and that made the basket watertight. Moses' mother was very smart. In fact, tar is still used today on the roofs of homes in order to keep them watertight. So here we have our basket, and we're going to have to place Moses in the basket. So he was a baby, And babies' heads are generally in larger proportion to their bodies than adults. We're going to have Moses laying in there, and we're going to see him from the side. So I just want you to start with a slight semicircle like this. We're just going to start with that. And then another kind of long semicircle like this, like the body. So this is going to be the blanket. Now when you don't ever really see a baby's neck when they're really little. So we're just going to put some bumps here like it's a blanket, and then change this shape to just add a little tiny nose and a little tiny chin and a little tiny ear. Now what we want to add to this are the chubby little arms that Moses had reaching up. So one would come from this side, so start with a single line and then another line. Remember, they kind of act as like the structure, like a stick figure. And since baby arms are fairly chubby, you're going to kind of make it rounded parentheses type shapes so that the chubby little arms are reaching up. You're going to go on either side of your lines and do very tiny little hands at the end. So it's reaching up like that. Now I can take my eraser, get rid of the lines that I used as my guidelines. And so see, you have our Moses reaching up. Now friends, I can't turn my paper on the side like you can since mine's attached to the easel, but if it's easier for you to draw the baby Moses face by turning your paper, then do that. Okay, now to the right, right above this line, we're going to make a V, a very large curved V, like this. Those are the reeds that are separating, reeds meaning the large marshy plants that grow on the banks of the Nile. And in that V is where we're going to find a princess. See, the rest of the story is after Moses' mother placed him on the Nile, the basket drifted and floated in among the reeds. When Pharaoh's daughter, who was a princess of Egypt, went down to the Nile to bathe with her court, and she saw the basket in the Nile. And she actually took Moses and raised him as a prince in the court of Pharaoh. That's what Moses' future was. Wow! He was rescued by, you might say, his enemy. And the story really takes off from there. I hope you read it in the book of Exodus. Now here in the V is where we're going to draw the princess. Now she would have been peering down to see what was in the water. So if we were to do our stick figured as our guide, we would draw an oval, kind of angled. Then the spine would kind of go at an angle this way because the figure would be bent. The shoulders at an angle like this. And she would be using her hands to separate the reeds, so you'd only see part of them. So that's the basic outline. The rest of her is hidden behind the reeds. So now we need to fill this out. So round the shoulder. Remember, you go on either side of your stick figure line. And then here, where there would be reeds, we're going to have the knuckles of a hand. And you would draw the fingers. They're small, long ovals. On this side, again, a shoulder. You don't see the whole arm. And from shoulder to shoulder, we're going to draw a large semicircle like this, which represents a collar. And a small semicircle up by the neck. We know from ancient Egyptian drawings that women that were in the royal household would have very beautiful white tunics and these elaborate, very jewel-encrusted and gold collars. In fact, take a look at this ancient Egyptian drawing. You can see by there that you see the royalty has a triangular wig and a half-circle collar and even some cuffs around shoulders and wrists. So she was a princess. She would have had this large collar on. Perhaps a beautiful band of gold on her upper arm, so we'll place that there. And now we're just going to do a very simple face, an oval, a big open O for the mouth. She's quite surprised by what she finds, so it would be a surprised expression. The eyes are football shapes, and see, in ancient Egypt, the women there would outline their eyes very darkly, so we'll do that when we get to our pastel. Her hair would be almost a triangular shape. Go outside the oval and right about to the collar line, create this almost like a giant gumdrop. Doesn't that look like a giant gumdrop? And around the head, a headband, kind of low towards the eyes. That was the style in ancient Egypt. And then her tunic and a belt, and perhaps the rest of the dress would flow down here along with the reeds. And again, we would have another hand on this side separating the reeds. So you can see we know there's going to be reeds here, and there's our princess who sees the basket, and then the basket down here. Now that's all we're going to do with our pencil. The rest we're going to move on to our pastel. So put your pencil down, and let's recall a few tips on when we work with pastel. We always want to make sure that we're clean when we're working with pastel, that we keep our clothes clean, we keep our hands clean. So if you have on just a t-shirt, you're fine. If you have on long sleeves, roll your sleeves up. If you have on something really nice that you don't want to get dusty or dirty with pastel, then put on a work shirt. And I'm going to do that right now. Friends, anytime we're working on this lesson, and I'm going too fast for you, or you just need some more time, simply just pause your DVD. And then, when you're caught up, just hit play again. So now we're ready to work with our pastels. When we work with pastels, we work from top to bottom and from dark to light. I have it on the easel. I know my dust is going to fall down, so that's why I want to work from top to bottom. Even if you're working on a surface like a desk or a table, you're going to want to work from top to bottom, because periodically pick up your paper and tap it onto the surface so that the extra dust falls down. Don't ever brush your hand or blow on it. You'll just get colors mixed in where you don't want. So to start, I want to do the sky. Since we're at the top. Now, we're going to have reeds here. We're going to put those in soon. But I want to start off with a beautiful blue Egyptian sky. So I'm just going to take the side of my pastel, give a nice pressure, and go about halfway down. I'm going to go around the princess's head. And I can use my finger to blend that in. Now, if you don't like the shade of blue or it's too dark, you can use your eraser to pick some up, or you can add in some white if it's not blue enough. That's a great part about pastels. You can mix and layer. I'm going to grab a white and just lighten up just a little bit up here. There we go. Now we're ready to do our reeds. When you're doing something that has a lot of detail, such as the reeds where there's a lot of marsh grasses, first I lay down a base color. Then I'll come back and put in detail. So I'm going to take a lightish green, and I'm going to just go over the entire area and even intersect with my blue a little bit, right down to the waterline. I'm just going to be a little more careful when I get where the reeds separate. Grab a tissue. And blend that in a little bit. Now I'm going to work on the base color for the Nile River. That's going to be a much deeper blue than my sky. Now, I don't know that the Nile was really a blue type river. Rivers are not the same as oceans. Usually rivers look duller. But we do know that the Nile was the largest and most important river in the ancient world, and in Egypt, they thought that the Nile had special powers. And I'm sure that's what Pharaoh's daughter thought when she found the baby. She knew it was a baby from the Hebrew people, because she knew what her father had decreed. But she didn't mind. She just thought the Nile brought this special Hebrew baby to her. So I have a base color for my Nile. And this is not it. We're not finished. This is just the base color. But you can already kind of see it coming together. Now I want to put in the basic color of my basket. So I want a couple of different shades of brown so that I can put some dimension in my basket. So I'm going to use this kind of reddish brown and very lightly, and I'm going to make my strokes in the direction of the weave of the basket. So I'm going horizontally. I'm leaving some of the paper showing through and coming up a little bit on the sides. Now I'm going to take a darker shade, the back side of the oval, and again make some strokes in the direction of the weave of the basket. Then I'll take my very darkest shade, do the edges, the inside of the oval, just on the edges, like so, and the bottom of this basket. Now I'm going to use my finger to blend just a little bit, and then I'm going to take that dirty finger that has the brown and bring it just down into the water. I'm actually creating a little shadow under the basket in the water with the brown that I already have on my finger. Now, let's put some detail in our river. Let's get some different shades of blue and some white, maybe even a little teal. Have those handy. And whenever we're working with water, friends, we want to make sure that since water lays flat, so to speak, on the surface, we want to make strokes that are in the direction of laying flat. In other words, we're not making curves. This isn't an ocean wave. This is a river. And so we're just making some small marks that are horizontal in the same direction. But in order to show how wide the Nile was, it's kind of hard to tell from this, we're going to take our dark blue. We're actually going to make it darker back here by the reeds. Using the side of my pastel. And I'm going to use my finger to drag the color down in towards the lighter blue. We want to create some dimension so that it doesn't look like it's flat, that the river moves back. So you can see I made it darker back here. Now you can continue to play with the water, add in some more strokes of color if you like, add in some white highlights. You know, sometimes the sun reflects on the surface. There'd be these little ripples, and so you would have these little tiny white marks. You can make it lighter towards the front, and that's what creates the illusion of depth. Now we're ready to do our reeds, and just like we did with the water, you want to have several colors handy to work together. So I can see that I need to do another cleanup of my hands, and we'll need to grab, in order to do the reeds, we're going to need to grab several shades of green, and some browns. Now let me talk to you about the reeds we're going to have by the Nile. We know that the basket was made of papyrus, which was a reed that grew there, very prolific in Egypt. In fact, they made their paper out of it. It was called papyrus. But papyrus was too thin to be used for everything that they had in Egypt. There were some things that needed more strength, and so one of the strongest reeds that grew in Egypt was a cattail. Maybe you've seen them in marshes here where you live. But a cattail is a very long, grassy type reed, has very long leaves, and it also has a stalk that has at the end of it, kind of looks like a fuzzy hot dog. And so they were either small like this, or there were some larger ones that grew, and those reeds were so stiff and solid they could be used for a lot of things. So they grew along the Nile, and so we're going to do a bunch of cattails, and that's what the princess is pushing away, separating so she can see what's going on in the river. So here's some fun stuff we're going to do. We're going to take 2 shades of green, and we're going to actually start at the bottom where the water is. Press hard using the edge of our pastel, and as we release, we're kind of going up like this, and we're quick motions, broad motions. But we're also making sure they're not up perfectly straight. They kind of cross over each other. Can you see that? Can you see where it's almost like giant grass? Starting from the bottom so that I get that nice pointy top. Turn your pastel so some are thicker than others. And you're going to go all the way across. Now when you get towards where the princess is, you've got to be very careful. You don't want to cross over into her. But that's where the reeds are pushed over, so make sure your direction follows that V where she has separated those reeds. And then of course on this side as well. You can hear the sound the chalk is making as I make the strokes. Now I'm going to go back in with a different green and do the same thing. Pressing hard, making large grassy type marks. Time for some more color, so I want to add in some browns. So I'm going to use this kind of tannish color and make those kind of thin. Some of the reeds are dried out and dying, some are younger shoots. That's why there's all this different colors, and it's not one color. And then some in the brown. Use the corner of your pastel to get the finer mark. Now at the top of some of these friends is our cattail. This is fun part. So I'm going to, every here and there, make a long, kind of think a brown fuzzy hot dog. And you can have it up towards the, into the blue of the sky, and then just a little part of the twig sticky part sticking out. And then I'll do another one here. And they kind of all blow in the breeze, different angles. So now, if you need to, you can pause and just add in as many cattails as you like. And we'll be back in a bit. All right, so when you've got enough cattails that everybody gets the idea, still hold on to the brown, and down at the bottom you're going to make smaller marks because there would be a lot of deeper shadows at the bottom there where the reeds are growing out of the water. So you're actually adding in some brown, and you're going to blend it in with your finger into that. So you can see how we're creating kind of a darker, more shaded version down the bottom, which makes sense, right? Light doesn't reach down to the bottom of the reeds as it would at the top. So you're doing that right at the water line. And it's okay if you smudge into the water line because they're in the water. These actually grow out of the water on the water's edge. These reeds, they're marshy plants. Don't forget the other side. Okay. So there's our bank of the Nile with our reeds. You can add in more green or more cattails, whatever you like, to make the drawing your own. I do see, though, that some of my reeds and sky are not in this open spot here where the princess isn't. So I'm going to go back in and very carefully put in some base color. I'm not going to put in a lot of detail because we don't want anybody to focus on that, but I do want to make sure I fill that in since that's not where the princess is. Okay, so what about our princess? Well, let's start off by doing her skin, whatever color you like. She probably had darker skin than this, growing up in Egypt, all that sun. I'm using just a kind of a beigey color. And so you're going to very carefully, where her hands are and her arms, and her face. Now you might recall I said that in the royal households, the women would heavily make up their eyes with something called kohl. Not kohl like C-O-A-L that we use as a fuel here, but kohl, K-O-H-L. And so they had very heavy, kind of like an eyeliner on. They love to use that on their face. So we are going to do that in a little bit. But part of what we know, she would have probably a white tunic. White was most often worn because it was so hot in Egypt. The sun was blazing, and so white linen was the coolest color. It was easier for them to deal with the heat. So she would have on a white tunic, and her collar, because she was in the royal household, her collar would have a lot of gold and lapis lazuli and carnelian, some beautiful gems and jewels from there. So what we're going to do, since we know from ancient pictures, it's almost like a giant stripe. So there would be a band of, say, the bright lapis lazuli. Let's finish off in a bright band of lapis lazuli. So right here at the very bottom of the giant collar is a stripe of blue. And then we'll take some yellow to be some gold. We'll put that. You can see how bright this is. So it's like big semicircular stripes, but that's what they look like. And then we'll fill in that gap with some red. So it's like primary colors. You can just use the edge of your pastel. And so that's really what her royal collar would look like. And I would imagine that the cuffs on her arms were made of gold. Kind of like bracelets, but they wore them up higher. And just to give it some dimension, we'll, on the edges there, put some color. And her headband would be gold, so we'll do that now. And then you get to take your black pastel, my friends, and her hair, it was actually probably most likely a wig, would be black. The Egyptians, we know, favored black hair, black wigs. The men would often be bald. The women would often wear these oddly shaped wigs, almost like a giant triangle. So fill that in with some black. Now I'm very carefully blowing on mine so that I don't get a lot of black. Make sure you don't brush with your hand, get that black dust everywhere. The other option, friends, is to simply take your softest, drawing pencil, like a 6B, and you can fill it in with that too. That looks almost black. With the very corner of your pastel, you can outline the eye with that. Remember, we talked about the dark eyeliner. The princess is so shocked to see what she sees in the river. You can grab an ear swab. If you have one handy, it's just smaller than a tissue and you can kind of see where you're going, and blend in that black hair a little more, like that. Oh, I forgot her belt. Most likely a gold belt around her tunic. Now we're down to our baby Moses, and this is the fun part. I'm so excited. This is where we get to use our fluorescent pastels. Now, you probably have an orange fluorescent pastel in your set. That's what we're going to be using for baby Moses' body. And we want to have a very light hand, a very delicate touch whenever you're drawing a baby. Not hard like you would for a grown-up. Let me show you this beautiful painting by the French female artist Berthe Morisot. She was known for doing some beautiful paintings of babies. And here's one that's called The Cradle. And you see how round and delicate this baby's features are. Very difficult to see through the gauzy veil that is over the cradle, but small fine lines for the eyes and the nose and the rounded features. And it creates the air that this is a very delicate creature. And that's what you want to do when you're doing Moses in the basket. Now, even though we know Moses was going to grow up to be the deliverer of the nation of Israel, he started off as a baby. So very lightly with your fluorescent orange, we want to fill in his arms. Use the corner if you need to. His little pudgy hand reaching up, his shoulder, and his other pudgy arm. And in order to put in the features, my friends, we don't want to use a heavy pastel. That just won't work. So we're going to take our pencil again. And the pencil is actually where you're going to put in some of the features, like the ear and the little open eye and the little mouth. So, because it's more delicate. And then I'm actually going to add in a few little curls. I don't know, I have a feeling Moses probably had some hair. So then when we're finished with our fluorescent orange, take another color. I'm going to use my fluorescent blue. You can use your green or another color to do the baby blanket in the basket. I'm going to use the fluorescent pink to just put a little bit of pink on his cheeks, just like that. Now this is the point in the drawing where you get to go back and say, what do I need to add? What do I need to make sure is finished? I can see I left a little bit of the basket undone, so I'm going to fill that in. I want to create a little bit more shadow in the water. So there we have our Moses drawing, and this is the fun part, my friends. Moses was the hope for the nation of Israel, and so now under black light we'll get to see that hope who was the deliverer. Hey, I just thought of something. Moses, a baby sent to deliver a people. What story does that sound like, my friends? Yes, of course, the story of Jesus, who of course was God, not just a man like Moses, but was a baby who was sent to deliver the people. Jesus is our hope for the entire human race, just as Moses was the hope for the nation of Israel. So let's see that now. So here was the hope of the nation of Israel. Came as a baby, Moses. It reminds us of foretelling of the baby that came to save the world. In 2 Corinthians 1:10 it says, He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and He will deliver us. On Him we have set our hope that He will continue to deliver us. What a great message. I hope you enjoyed our special story of Moses, Hope of the Nations. See you next time, friends.